I'll bet none of you knew that I played the banjo. I didn't know it either until a couple of months ago.
I love the banjo.
My brother gave me this nice banjo. Weighs about as much as a bushel of potatoes. Very heavy thing. We're going to be singing some songs today, or I hope you can help me sing them today, that Alfred Hurst would have known about. He would have sung some of them too. You all have on your table a piece of paper that looks like this. In case you don't know the words to things like, oh well, let's see, like Buffalo Gals, Won't You Come Out Tonight, or Dixie, or those kinds of songs. The page is right here, you can read them and sing along. I hope you can sing along, we'd appreciate it. I'd like it if you did, it would help me out a lot. So, but first there's going to be a little history lesson. I know that sounds exciting. Anyway, we'll start here. During the tragic and misguided years of slavery in America, there appeared a new genre of light-hearted song from the Deep South. These were songs first presented to the public on the stage in the form of black-faced minstrel shows. I don't know how many of you here remember seeing a black-faced minstrel show, but they're not that far back in history. They became so popular in the 1800s that many of the songs that first appeared during those years are still familiar with us today, and we still know of the songs today. In those days, the troubadours and the minstrels, the people that would do these songs, created their own verses many times to better suit their audiences. As a result, some of the songs have upwards of 100 verses to them, which I'm not gonna sing all those 100 verses today. That would take until Friday. So anyway, Albert Hurst was born in Lincolnshire, England in 1841, during the time when all this interesting and vibrant new music was flooding stages and concert halls and saloons. Don't forget saloons, in Midwestern America. Alfred's father, Abraham, was a sawyer. He made his living hand-sawing mahogany veneer used on the walls of mansions and fine furniture and humidors and music boxes and other products of the day. And I can't really imagine how you can hand-saw veneer, because it's so thin. I think it might be one of those lost arts today. Back in those days, in 1822, Abraham, Alfred's father, probably heard of the invention of the first mechanical computer in 1822, and he would have thought it was clever, the invention of the refrigerator in 1834, and likely interested in the invention of the first electric printing telegraph fax machine in 1843. The first fax, 1843. That was a British invention, but it eventually would be heavily used in the US, or in America, that's what it was called, by investors everywhere in the form of the ticker tape machine. And then there was the telegraph too. These were all exciting new investments, inventions. The excitement of America must have been very tempting for Abraham. Suddenly it looked as though everything was about to change, and the Industrial Revolution was beginning to take shape in the 1840s. And as we now know, it did change everything. So in 1852, Abraham Hurst decided that it was time to make the lives of his family better by immigrating from England to America. Alfred was a child of 5 when the family sailed from Liverpool for New Orleans on a very long and difficult journey that must have been very uncomfortable by any standards of comfort then or now. The only practical way to get to America in the mid-1800s was across the Atlantic Ocean. And the only way to cross the Atlantic Ocean was either by a small, slow wooden sailing ship or the new, much more expensive, side-mounted paddle wheel steamships. By the way, those new steamships with paddle wheels on the sides, they still had their masts and their sails, just in case the newfangled steam engine broke down mid-ocean. They could still get to New Orleans. Most working class people, like the Hurst family, couldn't afford the faster steamship, so they settled for the older sailing ship. So they got to sail across the Atlantic in a sailing ship, you know, with the sails like the old days. It sounds romantic, doesn't it? Well, wait for it. The average length of a transatlantic trip by steamship was 8 days, but the average sailing ship crossing took about 40 days. The Hurst trip took 11 weeks. That's 77 days, almost 3 months. Historical records didn't tell me why it took them so long, but it could have been a number of different things, broken masts, storms, what have you. The comforts that we're all familiar with today, including privacy, weren't available on those small wooden ships. Most of us here today would totally reject the travel in anything remotely resembling what the Hursts had to endure during their dream voyage to America. They knew that once the ship left the port, they would be marooned on the ship for the entire trip, sharing pretty much everything with pretty much everybody else on board. And try to imagine what that would be like. How would we respond to a damp, hard wood floor rocking back and forth all the time, day and night, without end, in a small space, shared with numerous others, making the same uncomfortable voyage for 3 months? How many of us would have escaped without murdering someone? That would have been tough. An experience like that would have driven the normal person to drink. Incidentally, some of the passengers on the Hurst boat would have had their own supplies of homemade whiskey or moonshine to take the edge off the discomfort of the trip. And they would also have brought their skills and experience at making their own whiskey or moonshine, in the belief that the New World would provide them a greater opportunity for peaceful production of their favorite beverage. Right? The New World. He remembers. The moonshine ideal crossed the ocean with immigrants and came to us as a result of centuries-old conflicts with the tax man in Europe. Now, during the 1800s, rural American farmers, many of whom were European immigrants, believed that it was their right to make their own whiskey, just like their ancestors had done ever since whiskey had been made. Now, this was a long-standing problem for the American government, as they believed they should be able to tax whiskey, and probably felt they were losing control of its production. So as early as 1780, President George Washington tried to stop what was then called the Whiskey Rebellion. Due to the prolific private production of the stuff, he used the full force of the American military, such as it was in those days, to try and bring a halt to whiskey making. But the farmers persevered, and all during the 19th century and early part of the 20th century, a guerrilla war with government revenuers waged on, according to the farmers of the day, in order to maintain their God-given right to make their own whiskey. This wasn't so much a political battle from the farmer's point of view as it was economic, because most of the farms in those days were very small, and the farmers had to raise their crops by hand. John Deere hadn't showed up yet. So it was far more profitable for the farmer to sell his grain in the form of whiskey than it was in the form of grain. It makes sense. Now, the same year the Hurst came to America, which was 1852, the Butterworth House, just outside Andrew, was under construction. The first governor, as we all know, Ansel Briggs, would live there in that house until 1871. And during this time, he probably went to a lot of social events up in the ballroom on the 3rd floor. Now, every time I drive by there, that Butterworth House north of Andrew, I look at that 3rd floor and I'm trying to imagine, could they actually stand up straight in there? Is there enough room, enough ceiling room? Because
Sure,
it does not look big.
I was in it.
You were in it.
Oh, yeah.
Is it big enough to stand up in?
Oh, yeah.
Oh, okay. Doesn't look like it from the road. Wow. Did you know Alfred Hurst?
What's that?
Did you know Alfred Hurst?
No.
No, you might have known one of his
I
kids,
know about
though.
the line kills, though.
Oh, yeah. When Abraham Hurst and his family finally reached the port of New Orleans after their 3-month voyage, and they disembarked from that cramped, aromatic sailing craft, they climbed onto another wooden boat for the slow trip up the Mississippi River to the settlement called Davenport, which at the time was a small but very active river village. Dad, Abraham, went to work as a bricklayer in Davenport, and he kept busy until his death 4 short years later in 1856. And life in those days was harsher than it is today, and it wasn't at all unusual for men to live a short time by today's standards. As we might imagine, Abraham's death was a severe blow to the family. With few other choices for caring for her kids, Abraham's widow Eliza married Charles F. Stein, a resident of Davenport, soon after Abraham's death. And Alfred was 9 years old at the time that he got his stepdad. Incidentally, I recently read that the wealthiest man in Iowa today has the same last name, Stein, spelled S-T-I-N-E. Coincidence? Don't know. Might be a connection. Alfred's new stepfather, Mr. Stein, did the right thing for Eliza and Abraham's 6 kids. And from historical records, it appears that he was a man of good quality and dependable. 5 years after Alfred's death, when Alfred was about 14 years old, Abraham Lincoln became president. Now, many of the folk songs of the day sprang forth as true and accurate reflections of living conditions in the 1800s. The song "Buffalo Gals, Won't You Come Out Tonight" arrived on the music scene sometime in 1844, probably written by one of those traveling minstrels. By the time Alfred Hurst was a teenager, this song would have been very popular and well known everywhere, including his village in Davenport. It originally referred to the numerous dancing girls who performed in the local bars, concert halls, and other questionable entertainment establishments in the Buffalo, New York Canal District. This was a 2-block long street called Canal Street, and that was the Canal District. At the time, Buffalo was the western terminus of the Erie Canal, and the site where these canal and freighter crewmen got paid at the end of their work week. So there was ample opportunity for dancing girls to make a living in the area. Incidentally, these canal and freighter crewmen, they would take their pay to the local pub or the saloon or the music hall on Canal Street, and they go in and have a good time with part of their pay, and sometimes with all of it. But they were not allowed to carry their lanterns inside with them in these old wooden buildings, because one might get kicked over and there were oil lamps and start a fire and burn the building down. So they had to leave all their red lanterns outside the door on the street. And so guess what came from that? The red light district. I never knew that. All right. Alfred Hurst may have heard this song as, well, wait a minute, I skipped the part. Buffalo Gals became one of the best known tunes of the time, and minstrels oftentimes would change the lyrics to match the location of their performance. So Buffalo Gals, Won't You Come Out Tonight, could have been Boston Gals, Won't You Come Out Tonight, if they were in Boston, or Schenectady Gals, Won't You Come Out Tonight. And Alfred probably heard it as Davenport Gals, Won't You Come Out Tonight. I remember the song from the classic 1939 movie, It's a Wonderful Life, with Donna Reed and James Stewart. And this was the towel scene where her towel fell off and she had to run behind the bushes. Right before that, they sang this song. And you've got this paper on your table. If you wish to sing along, that would be very nice. I could probably use some help. All right. So here we go. This is Buffalo Gals, Won't You Come Out Tonight. We can start. It goes like this. And you can jump in anytime you want. Buffalo Gals, won't you come out tonight? Come out tonight. Come out tonight. Buffalo Gals, won't you come out tonight? And dance by the light balloon. I'm going to do a verse here. As I was walking down the street, down the street, down the street, a pretty young girl I chanced to meet. Oh, she was fair to view. Ready? 1, 2, 3, 4. Buffalo Gals, won't you come out tonight? Come out tonight. Come out tonight. Buffalo Gals, won't you come out tonight? And dance by the light balloon. I can hardly hear you. Can you hear me? Okay, one more time. 1, 2, 3, 4. Hey! Buffalo Gals, won't you come out tonight? Come out tonight. Come out tonight. Buffalo Gals, won't you come out tonight? And dance by the light balloon. Give yourself a hand. That was great. You did good. Yeah, very good. Alfred lived at home with his stepfather and mother until the breakout of the Civil War. While he was still a teenager, he enlisted in the transportation service, and he was attached to the Mississippi River Fleet, was present at the battles of Paducah, Fort Donelson, and Shiloh. And the Battle of Shiloh was so costly in human life that in the aftermath, Alfred assisted many other survivors for 2 days, burying all the dead in the field. One of the better known and colorful tales of the day was Grandma smoking a cigar. Right? You've all heard this. Now that wasn't because she liked to smoke cigars, it was because cigar smoking was considered a folk remedy in those days. And she'd inhale some and keep it in her mouth for a few seconds, and then exhale it. And this was supposed to reduce the discomfort caused by her toothache. So cigars actually had a constructive purpose once upon a time. One of the most popular and well-known songs of the Civil War during Alfred's days told the story of the fate of a strong-minded militant abolitionist named John Brown. Brown was famous for his raid on the armory at Harper's Ferry. He was caught and convicted of murder and treason and was hanged as a traitor. This was a big surprise to everybody that he actually succeeded in that. So here's John Brown's body, and this is number 2 on your paper. John Brown's body. You can sing along if you wish. I'm going to start with a verse, and then I'll let you know. John Brown's body lies mouldering in the grave, while beneath the sons of bondage whom he ventured on to save. But though he lost his life while struggling for the slave, his soul is marching on. Now I know everybody can sing glory, glory, hallelujah, right? 2, 3, 4. Glory, glory, hallelujah. Glory, glory, hallelujah. Glory, glory, hallelujah. His soul is marching on. That sounded pretty good. I'm going to do another verse now. He captured Harper's Ferry with his 19 men so few, and frightened old Virginia till she trembled through and through. They hung him for a traitor, who sells the traitor crew. His soul is marching on. Your turn. Glory, glory, hallelujah. Glory, glory, hallelujah. Glory, glory, hallelujah. His soul is marching on. Good job. Eventually, this same melody was used again as a grand marching song for the military, with the words were changed by Julia Ward Howe to the song we know today as the Battle Hymn of the Republic. In September 1963, Alfred was captured by the rebels and forced into Confederate service under General Forrest. He saw battle during Forrest's raid on Memphis as a conscripted Confederate soldier. Now, Memphis is in Tennessee, and that's a long way from Iowa, especially in the 1800s. It's a long way. It's way out there past Ohio. Alfred wasn't happy in servitude to the Confederacy, and he waited and watched for his escape opportunity. One night it finally came. In the dark of the night, through the sleeping Confederate camp, with most of the campfires little more than embers by that time in the early morning, he and 2 of his buddies quietly crept across the grounds and escaped the Southern Army and made their way to St. Louis. Free at last! And St. Louis was a real big deal in those days. It was the main entrance to, it was the gateway to the West, literally the gateway to the West. So once in St. Louis, Alfred got a job on the steamboating industry on the Mississippi River, and he stayed at that until 1866. By then, Andrew Johnson was president, and the memory of Abraham Lincoln's recent demise was still fresh in everybody's mind. During the Civil War, there was a song that became the de facto national anthem of the Confederate States. It also happened to be one of Abraham Lincoln's favorite songs, and it was played at the announcement of the surrender of Robert E. Lee. The end of the war, they played this song. The song, Dixie, there she is, originated in the minstrel shows in the 1850s and was probably responsible for the word Dixie becoming part of Americans' vocabulary. Here's Dixie. This is number 3 in your sheet on your page, if you don't know the words. If you'd like to sing along, I'm going to do verse 2 first, and then I'll let you know when to come in. Let me get... Land of cotton, old times there are not forgotten. Look away, look away, look away. Dixieland, in Dixieland, where I was born. Early on across the morning, look away, look away, look away. Dixieland, ready? 2, 2, 3. Well, I wish I was in Dixie. Hooray, hooray. In Dixieland, I'll take my stand to live and die in Dixie. Away, away, away down south to Dixie. Away, away, away down south to Dixie. Okay, my turn. There's buckwheat cakes and Injun batter. Makes you fat or a little fatter. Look away, look away, look away. Thousands of soldiers, young and old, been gone from their homes, from their loved ones, for several years, many times without word of their well-being. The anguish and the longing and the doubt and the worry created by such a situation was almost impossible to endure for many family members of the soldiers. So many would never return to their beloved homes, whether they be from the north or the south. Cousins fought cousins, brothers fought brothers. The Civil War was as bloody, costly, vengeful, and a hate-filled general insanity as any war ever fought before or since. Happy thought, huh? Toward the end of the Civil War, however, there existed great excitement and hope and longing to once again see husbands, fathers, sons, and brothers returning home, coming walking up the road. One of the most endearing songs of the day was called "When Johnny Comes Marching Home Again." This song related to hopes and desires of all those who had loved ones involved in the Civil War. Originally, it was an Anglo-Irish folk tune, but the words were changed to meet the situation of the day. And this is number 4 on your pages. It goes like this. You can jump in anytime. When Johnny comes marching home again, hurrah, hurrah. When Johnny comes marching home again, hurrah, hurrah. The men will cheer, the boys will shout, the ladies say we'll all turn out. We'll all feel gay when Johnny comes marching home. Is that too fast for you? How about faster? Okay. When Johnny comes marching home again, hurrah, hurrah. When Johnny comes marching home again, hurrah, hurrah. The men will cheer and the boys will shout, the ladies say we'll all turn out. We'll all feel gay when Johnny comes marching home. Yeah. What a happy song. That was probably the happiest song of the war. Now, this war was finally over. The countryside was returning to a state of peace and tranquility. Cornelius Vanderbilt was active in the building of the railroad system, a fact of the day that may have led Alfred to see the handwriting on the wall about his steamboating job on the Mississippi and its bleak future. He wanted to go home to Davenport, and he did so in 1866. Once he got there, he learned the trades of bricklaying and plastering like his dad. While he was actively involved in Davenport at his newfound trade, he learned that the world's first transcontinental railroad, had been completed and was open for business in 1869. Well, what a temptation this must have been to Alfred Hurst. He could now get out to San Francisco in a few days, and all he had to do was sit in a chair and look out a window. It was no longer a hard trip. But he stuck around. He stayed here. He stayed with us. It's here in our history that one of the most enduring folk songs of the American culture arrived on the scene. Tom Dooley is a song about a wild young American male who recognized few boundaries in his lifestyle. Dooley, like many other wild young Americans of the time, enjoyed the Civil War, and he was sad when it ended. He wanted to keep killing the Rebs. Once he got back home to Wilkes County, he acquired the reputation of a desperado, and he cut a wide swath with the ladies of the hills across the Yadkin River, which a Herald Tribune reporter of the time described as a territory in which free loveism prevails, and it's a wise child that knows his father. Tom courted Laura Foster, blue-eyed, beautiful, and wild as a buck deer. But his fancy soon turned to another woman, Ann Melton, whom one old-timer recalled as the purest woman I ever looked in the face of. This new affair, however, with Ann was soon blighted when Dooley realized that wild as a buck Laura had left him with a lasting legacy of suffering and pain. He swore that he would put her through for this misfortune. That's when he and Ann conspired to murder Laura Foster. This is a true story. This actually happened. As far as we know, it's kind of like this. He swore that he put her through for this misfortune. One Thursday night, his new girlfriend, Ann Melton, and he dug a grave on a lonely hillside outside of town. The next day, Tom lured Laura away from her dad's house with a promise to marry her. They walked up the hill together, and once they got up to the location, Tom took a drink, and then he wiped his mouth with his bandana, and he kindly and lovingly offered his bandana to Laura to wipe her mouth, and when she accepted, he stuffed it down her throat and jumped out of the bushes and stabbed her right in the stomach, killed her. It's a true story. When they made sure the victim was dead, they buried her in the shallow grave on the mountainside and returned to their homes as if nothing happened. Well, Laura's body was discovered 6 weeks later, and both Tom and Ann were arrested. During Tom's 2-year-long trial, he always denied that Ann Milton had anything to do with the crime. This was his proof that he loved her. He composed this song during his last days in jail without ever mentioning her name. Today we know the song, of course, as Tom Dooley. Anybody remember the song Tom Dooley? Hang down your head, Tom Dooley? Right, okay. Now, so, the Kingston Trio made it in the 60s, so I'm going to sing a verse, and then if you'd like, you can sing along with me. Hand me down my banjo, I'll take it on my knee. This time tomorrow will be no use to me. This is number 5 on your pages. Ready? 1, 2, 3, 4. Hang down your head, Tom Dooley. Hang down your head and cry. Hang down your head, Tom Dooley. Poor boy, you're bound to die. Met her on a mountain, I swore she'd be my wife. Met her on a mountain and stabbed her with my knife. Ready? Here we go again. Hang down your head, Tom Dooley. Hang down your head and cry. Hang down your head, Tom Dooley. Oh, you're bound to die. Anybody remember how the Kingston Trio ended this? Oh boy, you're bound to die. All right. Good job, guys. Good job. For a bunch of people that weren't going to sing anything, you're doing really well. Alfred Hurst had certainly heard this song, favorite song of the age, and he might have even hummed it to himself on his 40-mile trek north from Davenport when he came to Maquoketa in 1871. Just in time, coincidentally, for the construction of the Jackson County Jail in Andrew. This was the first jail that began its operation in 1871, was the first jail in Iowa to house both male and female prisoners. Not in the same cell, but they had facilities to put men and women under lock and key at the same time. That was pretty remarkable back in those days. I'm not certain if Alfred had anything to do with the construction of the jail, but he certainly knew about it. And his decision to move to Maquoketa was probably made after having heard of the numerous and abundant limestone deposits in the area, part of which went into the Andrew jail. Eventually, he found the limestone he was looking for 1.5 miles north of Maquoketa, Hurstville. He immediately constructed a pot kiln and began burning lime on a small scale. His first efforts averaged about 100 barrels of lime a week. And within a very short time, probably a year or less, or somewhere around in there, he had 4 of the latest design draw kilns in operation, producing about 800 barrels each day. So he went from 100 barrels a week to 800 barrels a day in the same amount of time it would take us to get a bank loan for a house. So it's incredible. Once he felt reasonably secure, he married a girl named Sarah Laurie on December 12, 1873, and they had 5 kids eventually. Alfred's brother, William, had been with him ever since the beginning, providing practical and clever designs and ideas and business operations. William is said to have had excellent business knowledge and instincts. We don't hear much about William, but he was definitely a big part of that picture, William Hurst. After a time, the firm owned 820 acres of farmland and timberland in the vicinity of the kiln operation. It takes vast amounts of timber to fire the kilns, and that's why they had so much timberland. They employed more than 50 men full-time to keep the operation active and producing. A. Hurst and Company ranked as the largest operation of its kind west of Chicago. Lime produced in Hurstville was shipped throughout the Midwest and the Northwest and was handled by the best dealers. They also dealt in cattle, horsehair for the plaster, and a railroad. In 1888, they organized the Maquoketa, Hurstville, Dubuque Railroad Company and built the track from Maquoketa to their lime works. And I think they probably had thoughts of going all the way to Dubuque, but that never happened. Eventually, the two brothers grew wealthy and became influential throughout Jackson County. Now, railroads were a big thing. There's never been a subject responsible for more folk songs than the railroad. The railroad itself became folklore. In the early days, when men like Casey Jones were risking their lives to set speed records, each locomotive engineer designed his own whistle call. As the train went through the area, the whistle would tell the local people who the engineer was with his hand on the whistle rope. The whistles were as individual as the engineers themselves, and Alfred and William probably knew every last one of them firsthand. Wonderful dreams were had from the sounds of the railroad passing in the night. There was comfort in the knowing that all was well. The song, "She'll Be Coming Round the Mountain," was one of the many songs inspired by the railroad, and we sing it here. And it's not on your paper, but it's so easy. I figured probably enough of us know it to make it work. You can jump in whenever you want. Well, she'll be coming around the mountain when she comes. She'll be coming around the mountain when she comes. She'll be coming around the mountain. She'll be coming around the mountain. She'll be coming around the mountain when she comes. We'll kill the old red rooster. We'll kill the old red rooster when she comes. Well, we'll kill the old red rooster when she comes. Yeah, we'll kill the old red rooster. We'll kill the old red rooster. We'll kill the old red rooster when she comes. All right. Not bad for no words, huh? Here's a quote from a book I found at the library in their historical room, Jackson County History Book, it's called. It was probably a vanity press type of a thing where you could write whatever you wanted to and give it to them, and if you paid them, they'd print it in their book. And this was probably written, it's about Alfred Hurst, and it was probably written by Alfred, possibly with the help of his brother William. So I'm going to read this to you and see if it doesn't sound like something he would have or might have written. Alfred Hurst is a man of fine mental and physical caliber and is gifted with a bold and enterprising spirit and an exceptional talent for business. And in whatever scheme he is interested, he pushes it through with characteristic energy and tact. And his hand is felt in every movement for the benefit of the city, no one going beyond him in liberality and public spirit. I would have wrote something like that if I was Alfred Hurst. Sounded pretty good. Here's an article from 1906. Great excitement. It was reported in the Davenport newspaper on September 28, 1906, that oil had been discovered on a farm several miles north of Maquoketa. There was talk of vast amounts of crude oil seeping up out of the ground. Maquoketa's only oil well was drilled 5 miles northeast of town on Dark Hollow Road to a depth of about 1,700 feet. Maquoketa investors may have had dreams of avarice after the well delivered only, several barrels, the project was deemed failed. And I figure that 1906, Alfred and William are wealthy. They probably were speculators in this project. And the Maquoketa Sentinel declared the oil boom finished after only a few barrels. Another one. At that same time, Ring Lip Hardware. Anybody remember Ring Lip Hardware? Yeah. They sold hand-cranked washing machines, a wonderful new convenience for the lady of the house, and gas stoves for that quick meal. Yeah. Maquoketa's town clock stood proudly atop the Dobson building at the corner of Platt Street and Main Street, and Alfred probably looked at it every time he went by there. There lived 26 widows in the town of Delmer in 1896, probably due to the Civil War. Alfred Hurst lived through all this. He died in 1915, well into his 70s. He fell ill on a trip to Chicago and never returned to Maquoketa alive. He lived through the American political administrations from Abraham Lincoln to the first 2 years of the Woodrow Wilson administration. He experienced the death and destruction of the Civil War and the elation brought forth by its first hand. He felt the tragedy and sorrow, the assassination of Abraham Lincoln. Mr. Hurst felt great sympathy for the many victims of the sinking of the Titanic in the icy cold waters of the North Atlantic. He experienced the advent of the modern age, the invention of the typewriter, the automobile, the telephone, the radio, electric lighting in the home, and the appliances that came with electricity. Alfred Hurst knew of the Wild Bill Hickok, Wild Bill's traveling show during Wild Bill's life, and he may have seen the show. He read the latest news about Custer's last stand. He knew of the vast wealth of John D. Rockefeller and the Standard Oil Empire. He celebrated the Wright brothers' first flight with as much excitement as many of us celebrated the first landing on the moon in the 1960s. Alfred Hurst had lived a life as exciting and adventuresome as any we may know today. He was classed among the most stirring, able, and progressive of the enterprising businessmen of Jackson County, who have been largely instrumental in the upbuilding of the city of Maquoketa. The A. Hurst and Company continued business after Alfred's death, although not at full thrust. The kilns finally ceased operation in 1930, after which they lay dormant for 5 decades until the 1970s, when they were restored and are now owned and maintained by the Jackson County Historical Society, the good people who brought you this brown bag lunch. I have one more song for you. It was written by Stephen Foster, very well known throughout Alfred's life. It's one of Foster's most famous songs. It's called "Oh Susanna." It's number 6, the last one on the page. "Oh Susanna." It goes like this. I'm going to sing a verse first, then you can come in now. Well, I come from Alabama with a banjo on my knee. Going to Louisiana, my true love for sea. It rained all night the day I left. The weather, it was fine. The sun so hot I froze to death. Susanna, don't you cry. Now here's your turn. You're ready with "Oh Susanna"? 2, 3. Oh Susanna, don't you cry for me, 'cause I come from Alabama with the banjo on my knee. My turn. I had a dream the other night when everything was still. I thought I saw Susanna dear a-coming down the hill. The buckwheat cake was in her mouth, the tear was in her eye. Says I'm coming from the south, Susanna, don't you cry. Oh Susanna, don't you cry for me, 'cause I come from Alabama with a banjo on my... Let's do that again. Oh Susanna, oh, don't you cry for me, 'cause I come from Alabama with a banjo on my knee. Now let's really sing it out one last time. Ready? Yell it, shout it out. 1, 2, 3, 4. Oh Susanna, won't you cry for me, 'cause I come from Alabama with a banjo on my knee. Yeah. Well, thank you so much. Thanks for your support of the Jackson County Historical Society by visiting us today. Thank you. Thank you. I should take my microphone off if I'm going to talk to myself.
So I just want to thank Dan. That was awesome. Wasn't it fun? If we could learn all our history that way, that'd be the way to do it right. But you would not want me to sing, I can tell you that. I also want to thank him for mentioning William Hurst, because like he says, we don't very often hear very much about William Hurst, though he was such an important part of that whole business. And I just wanted to remind you of our Bill Lucky, who is so responsible for this museum. We couldn't have done this museum without him. He is an actual grandson, not a great-grandson, not a great-great-grandson, but he is a grandson of Alfred Hurst. He was born in Hurstville, he grew up in Hurstville, and when he was just a young man, worked for the Maquoketa Company that was here first, and one of only 6 people asked to stay on by Don Thomas when he moved Clinton Engine here. He actually has a photographic memory. And without what he remembers about Clinton Engine, the starting of Clinton Engine, we could not have put this museum together. So thank you to Bill Lucky and William Hurst and Dan Holm for a wonderful program. Thank you.